Welcome everybody, and this is the new Microsoft 365 platform community call. It is August 31st. It's, what is it, 4 months, 5 months, 4 months actually to Christmas, which is the holiday season in the end of the year, which is pretty weird. My name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a principal program manager in the Microsoft 365 platform level, of focusing on the platform holistically, pretty much, and we're driving the community efforts more and more as a whole Microsoft 365 platform, rather than trying to kind of isolate on a specific features or specific products, because quite often as we build a solution for the Microsoft 365, we are using Microsoft Graph, we're using SharePoint, we're using Microsoft Teams, we're using a lot of these technologies, we're using Office together. So we're kind of reformatting our monthly community calls to this one a unified call, which is happening in the weekly. And by the way, we just yesterday agreed also that Office extensibility call will be merged on this one after September call. So we're seeing those individual monthly calls to get dropped, and this weekly call is taking over. And then in this weekly call, we're looking into having 3 different demos always within the specific areas. So we're looking into sharing, of course, always the agenda few days before the call, so you will know what we're going to discuss. All the community calls are going to be recorded, and this time in this call we have 3 different demos. Again, we're starting like a quarter past on the demos. We'll start with Maldek on the getting started with Microsoft Graph Toolkit, then we move to Misa and Andrew on the Graph, Microsoft Graph .NET SDK v4, and then we'll actually show some stuff in the end. So talk about the Microsoft Teams UI Toolkit. Now, like I said, we're looking into having 3 demos in every single call. All of the calls are getting recorded. They're getting shared in the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel. And eventually all of the demos will be also released as an individual videos in that YouTube channel as well. So we're using this kind of a proven pattern, which we've done with some of the calls already, but moving into this weekly process. Today, we're going to have a quick update on the latest on the Microsoft 365 platform. There's few news from the last week. We also covered the monthly contributors in the Microsoft 365 platform community assets. So basically, as in the past, we had a monthly call where we went through. Now we're doing that once a month in one of these weekly calls, so we can actually go them through. We'll do a quick picture time together, so for those who are willing to participate in a nice GIF animation for waving hands, we're going to do that together today as well, and then we move into those 3 different demos of today, like quarter past on the hour. Now, before we actually get started on the news and all of that, so just making sure that everybody is up to date on the assets and availability, what's available. So we have 2 different YouTube channels in the Microsoft 365 platform and extensibility area. We have the Microsoft 365 developer videos, which is more for, in quotes, official videos driven by the cloud advocates on a specific technology on Microsoft 365. And then we have the Microsoft 365 community videos, which is more community call recordings and community demos from those recordings as well. So that's the differentiator between those. We have a lot of open source assets available in multiple different locations. We have a lot of samples available. I think we're breaking 600 samples, ready to use samples, and most of them are proven to be up to date as well. So we're really working hard on fixing any of the samples if they're outdated, making sure that they actually work across the different areas. And if they do not work, please do let us know. We're trying to fix that. If you're trying to or figuring out that there's too many URLs to remember, I can't remember all of this stuff, then there's actually only one of them, AKMS M365 PMP. From there, you will find detailed information around the different community calls, blog post locations, video locations, YouTube, documentation, samples, all of that stuff from one centralized location. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you as well. Now, you might be new on this stuff, you might be older in this stuff, but we want to make sure that everybody is aware that as part of the Microsoft 365 developer work, we are providing you a free E5 developer tenant. And the only thing what you need to do is sign up for the Microsoft 365 developer program at AKMS M365 Dev program. And this is really intended for you to then to have a environment where we have sample content, sample discussions, sample site collections, and all of that stuff available, so you can start building solutions and experiences on top of the Microsoft 365. And it is free and it's E5. Now, just a bit of a warning also there, it is intended for developer usage. So there is additional instrumentation which will detect that is it actually used for developer usage. So you cannot use these tenants for a production usage, and that will then basically make the tenant to expire. But no money involved. This is all free for you to take advantage. And as you sign into the Microsoft 365 developer program, you can sign up also for a free update from the Microsoft related on monthly news, emails, and all of that stuff. So it's a really cool way of keeping up to date on what's happening in Microsoft 365. Now, a few other news. So we are piloting, and this is in pilot mode. There's certain areas which we still need to actually update in here. But one of the things which we got feedback in the past year is that we have a lot of samples, and there's a lot of samples are in GitHub, and there's even sample galleries, and that's all cool. But I can't find the locations. So too many things to actually find. So we're finally releasing now, currently still in kind of a preview. There's certain things which we still need to polish. The new unified Microsoft 365 sample gallery. And this is intended to make it super easy for you to find samples. It doesn't matter if it's in Microsoft Teams, is it in bot framework, is it a SharePoint framework, targeting whatever capabilities, you can easily find that sample. And from here, you can then see, for example, what are the samples which specific users have contributed for the community. So there is actually this persona-based view as well. So you can see Nandip's persona-based view there, where we show information from GitHub and also the samples, what the particular user has actually contributed. And then when you go to the sample details page, there's a link to the GitHub. So we're trying to make it as easy for you to find what's relevant and the starting point for creating your extensibility for Microsoft 365. Now, some other news and updates. I think, David, you'll be the right one to talk about the Sharing is Caring initiative.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vesa. Well, friends, as you will find, there are a lot of resources available to you in the Microsoft 365 community. And because we are an open source community, we are also inclusive and welcome you to contribute back to all these resources in addition to using them. But we understand that there can be some hurdles and blocks along the way, such as familiarity with GitHub. How do you provide a pull request? What is a pull request? How can you actually help update things like the documentation, create new documentation? All those samples that Vesa just talked about, you can help contribute to them. But we understand that there's some blockers in how to take advantage of that. So Sharing is Caring is an initiative that's going to provide hands-on safe space opportunities for you to learn how to navigate some of these waters. They are live, they're not recorded, so you can ask any questions you want without fear of it being recorded and shared out to the community. It is conversational and collaborative. They are live and hands-on. We'll walk you through all the variety of topics you see from first-time contributor to the maturity model practitioners. And we also have a number of Ask Me Anything opportunities coming up on a number of topics, and we're just getting ready to schedule the list formatting with none other than Chris Kent. So take advantage of these opportunities, aka.ms/sharing is caring. We have sessions every single month. Follow the link in the chat, and we'd love to see you there. Vesa, back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Really, really awesome program. Once again, it's getting a lot of good feedback, and it's a really easy way to reach out for community people helping you to be successful across the different areas in Microsoft 365. There was a Microsoft Graph Toolkit sessions pretty recently, and I have a discussion with those engineers as well. So really, really cool stuff. Now, Sebastian's comment in the chat might be confusing for anybody who doesn't understand Chris Kent and horses. That is a inside joke related on fill list formatting. Now, moving on the kind of an updates of things. So first of all, quick promo on the Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast. This is typically happening once a week, where Jeremy Fake and Paul Schefferlein will have a visitor across the PM crew or engineering group in Microsoft 365 or some of the MVPs, and they also go through the latest updates on the platform. So really cool podcast program to actually get involved. Well, not directly involved, but maybe listening. So subscribe on that one. m365devpodcast.com is the address on that. Now, a few updates from the last week. So the latest news from Microsoft 365 platform. There's 3 news from last week, since last week. So we want to do this on a weekly basis. There is a new public preview version of upcoming SharePoint Framework 1.13. So SharePoint Framework 1.13 can be used to build extensibility for Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva, and of course for SharePoint. But more and more SharePoint Framework focuses on Microsoft Viva and Teams on the extensibility side. 1.13 is explicitly targeting Microsoft Viva, and there's a preview version available, and there was an updated beta version released on that one. So that's what that article is all about. Now, the other news which we had was around action required, update your Office add-in dialog for cross-domain communication. So if you are building Office add-ins, there's pretty recently we introduced this cross-solution discussion model, which relates on the cross-domain communication as well. So there are security adjustments on the Office add-in behind the scenes. So there will be a breaking change on this. So if you have an Office add-in available, please have a look on that blog post. It explains what has to be updated and all of the additional details. Now, the latest news is from today, which was around changes to Microsoft 365 usage report APIs. And this is kind of an informative blog post, which is referencing additional guidance from the support and other documentation. But key point here is that as part of our usage reports API, we kind of obfuscate, I think that's the right term, to say the specific user details. So we will by default basically remove the user detail information from them to making sure that it's more compliant and that user-specific information is not even shared on the Microsoft 365 Usage Reports API, even though you would have granted, of course, you would be an administrator hitting that API. But just in case, everything is by default encrypted or obfuscated, so to say. Now, moving on the other updates, like said when we started, we'll in one of these calls, which are happening weekly, always cover up also the monthly updates in the Microsoft 365 area. So once a month, we collect and release a pretty massive email where we collect all of the news, articles, blog posts, podcasts, videos, news samples, and all of the contributors. And this time, because well, to be honest, because we had a summer break, there's 253 contributors within the past month from an external community. And we want to really celebrate and thank all of you who have been involved and helping others to succeed as well. And this is really the power of the community, rather than hiding rather than banging yourself against the wall, not understanding how to make things happen, let's use the community's shared knowledge to make awesome things together. And that's really the core thing and core thinking behind of this. So sharing is caring initiatives and sharing is caring message is coming from the sharing the value what we can share, provide with sharing our knowledge between others. And this is the list of people between A to G. And then we actually are first time ever in 3 different slides. This is from H to P. We're not going to call out all of these people one by one, but these are the people who contributed in the open source, in the document, in the blog posts, in the YouTube, or in the community calls. There's multiple different ways of contributing in our community. And the last list of people from R to Y is that list of people. So thank you being part of the community. And if there's anything what's missing or what should be done better, please keep the feedback coming. We are here to make your life easier as a partner or as a customer building stuff on top of the Microsoft 365. Now, we also have permission to call out these companies, which are companies where the previous people were actually working on, and we do not have a permission to call out all of those companies which they work on. So, but if you are contributing and you want your company's logo to be mentioned in the next month in the slide, please share a permission for that one with us. So easiest way to do that is to reach out, for example, to me as a private message, or for example, Brian Jacket or somebody else from the Microsoft side, or for the BNP team side like David Warner, who was already talking today as well, and let us know how to get the permissions. We will get you the details. On the Microsoft side, there was also a lot of people contributing in the open source and community assets, so not forgetting about these people as well. So there's a lot of people actively involved on a monthly basis. Now, before we go to the actual demos of today, let's do a quick group photo. And what I mean with that one, for those who do not know how this works, is that let's put on the video and let's put on together mode. And I will basically move this in here, and hopefully together mode actually works well. There is a limit of 50 people who we can see. This is going to be the first Microsoft 365 platform call together mode. Let me actually flip, so we're not only on this basic setup. What do we want to do today? Let's actually do this darker one. There we go. Oh, there's a dog. I can see a dog. Awesome. I should go and pick up our dog as well. Well, there's 2 of them, but still. We still have room. It's maxed out at 50. Let's see how many people are coming in. I'm going to actually start the recording already, but let's wait for a while. We're maxing out 50 pretty soon. We want smiles and waving hands, right? Because this is awesome. This is brilliant. This is awesome. Let's do hand trading. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you for being open for this as well. We're going to put a GIF animation with the call summary in the blog post. Thanks, everybody. Awesome to see you face-to-face as well. Cool. That's a quick group photo. Thank you for that one. Now, and then it's time to actually go to the demos. And today, the first demo person will be Waldek Mastercard. Waldek, I saw you on the call already.
I'm here. Good day, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, perhaps, depending where in the world you are. Today, we will talk about Microsoft Graph Toolkit, and let me share my screen. So in our work every day, we create content on Microsoft 365, Microsoft Cloud. We create files, we create meetings, we chat, we collaborate, discuss, we meet. And it's not just us. It's a lot of people around us too, right? So with that, we create that place where there's a lot of invaluable content and insights available to us. And the cool thing is that all of the data and insights is available to us. If we want to extend Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Cloud beyond what is available out of the box, we can. We can build custom apps, web apps, daemons, device apps, or we can also extend Microsoft 365 within its extension points. We can build Teams tabs, we can build bots, we can build web parts, we can extend search. And we can, in these extension points, these different apps, we can bring together data and insights that are stored in Microsoft 365 and combine them with insights from our line of business apps, right? And we do all of that through the Microsoft Graph. Microsoft Graph API is that extension point, that API that gives us access to everything that is stored in Microsoft 365. And it's info about users, about chats, files, devices, emails, and many, many more endpoints that are available to us because we work on Microsoft Cloud. But there are 2 things that we need to do first before in these apps that we build, we get access to all these data and insights. First, we need to get a token. Like, who of us haven't really struggled with auth, right? Like, it isn't, at first, it intimidates you because you don't know where to start. And you always see like, yeah, so like in this step, put a token and you're good. But how do you do that? How do you do it? And how you handle auth in a safe way, in a way that also is required for the type of app you build. Then when you have a token, there is also the next step, because you have a token, you reach out to Graph, you get the data back, but then you also need to show the data in your app. And oftentimes it's also hard, right? Because it requires you to know CSS, and it's something that you might be skilled in or not. So oftentimes we heard developers talk about these 2 things, these 2 hurdle points they need to get through when they want to build apps on Microsoft 365 and actually enrich what is available already in there out of the box. And luckily, there is a cool thing available to you today already that solves these 2 points or challenges and does many, many more things. The thing is, Microsoft Graph Toolkit. What it is, it's a collection of auth providers. And with that, I mean, you can use it in virtually any type of web technology-based app you want. You can use Microsoft Graph Toolkit, for short, MGT, in a single page app, a web app, a Teams tab, and SharePoint Framework web part. Basically anything that is based on web tech, you can use MGT in there, and providers that are available in there for auth will allow you to seamlessly use the context of auth that you already have available in platform of your choice, whether that's Teams, SPFX, or a web app, and put that into to basically allow you to easily connect to Graph so that you will not need to fiddle with auth by yourself. So there's like one major headache solved already. What's more, in MGT, you will also find things that will allow you to really easily retrieve and show the data from Microsoft Graph in your app. Things like agenda, showing really easily a list of events with just a single line of code. I mean, I do not exaggerate, right? It's like you will be able to see this in practice. With a single line of code, you will show a list of events coming from Graph. And there are some other things like allowing you to show a list of files or pick a channel from Teams. So all of that is already available in Microsoft Graph Toolkit. And the cool thing is that it evolves. So every month, roughly, there is a release, and each release contains new components, new features that allow you to do more using the same simple approach. And what's more, third point, there's a lot of added value available in MGT2, right? Because the data that it retrieves, it's being cached, which means the apps you build work fast and work the way that users will like the experience, because you will not issue any additional requests that you actually do not need. So with that, I think it's the time to have a look at Microsoft Graph Toolkit in practice. And when I talk about MGT, Microsoft Graph Toolkit, I always like to start with MGT Dev. It's a great experience on the web that doesn't require you to install anything and that allows you to experience Microsoft Graph Toolkit in practice. So in here, we have an example of MGT Agenda, which is one of the building blocks that we have available in MGT, that allows you to show a list of events coming from the calendar of the current person coming from Graph and show that in our app. Notice that this is our app. In this case, our app consists of this single line of code. We have nowhere here auth or anything else. It's just this. Like there is no JavaScript that we need extra for it. There is no CSS. With this single line of code, we retrieve the data from Microsoft Graph, show it in our app, parse the response, and we have everything in place. You don't need to do anything else. It's that simple. Another thing is, for example, imagine that you want to let users pick a file, because that is one thing that we see a lot too, is that many apps circle around files. Right, so that is a common thing that we see developers build in their apps. Well, again, with MGT file list, you can show the list of files either from the whole drive or a specific folder of specific type and so forth and so on. It's as simple as that. There's also another cool thing that we see applies to many apps is people. Because no matter what type of app you build, you need some info about a person, whether that's your team, your colleague, sign a ticket, you want to see something else about someone. It's all about other users in your org, right? So in here, you have a simple way to show a list of people, right? And this is just a default, but there's also a way to apply a query that allows you to show a specific group of folks. Now, another cool thing is that we see a lot is the ability to show more info about a person. And like by itself, this is cool. But let me show you a thing that we see being used a lot, which is person with a person card. Right, so in here, you have additional info about, you see the person's picture, name, job title, department, email, telephone number, but also their org chart, some info about them. And all of that comes actually with this single line of code. The additional thing that we see here is meant to extend the person card with additional info about stuffed animal friends, apparently. Right? So it also shows you the ability that you are not only bound to the things that are available out of the box, but you can also adjust it to your own needs. And initially, I showed you for example, MGT agenda showing a list of events, but it doesn't need to look like this. Now, imagine that you want to show it like a timeline, 3 to 1, with some additional work. So imagine that in your team, you have a person who is skilled with HTML and CSS. They can easily build the code, the markup you actually need to have MGT download for you the list of events and display it in this view, which is very rich and yet simple. Because the cool thing is, nowhere in here you see us doing auth, getting a token, issuing a request to Graph, parsing response, handling errors. You don't need to worry about any of that. Microsoft Graph Toolkit does all of that for you, right? The only thing you need to do is to instruct it how you want to authenticate. In other words, what type of app you build, and then instruct it what data you want to show in your app, whether that's events, whether that's files, people, or something else. And the cool thing is that you can also have it like combine MGT with your own CSS. So for example, here, I combined MGT with the H2O framework, and I show info about files as cards, right? So in here, I've built my own template. I've showed info about file, and I have some extra CSS for that to show it the way I want to. So it's really flexible in the sense, and it really allows you to do anything you need. Well, the cool thing about MGT is that it's really simple. This is the minimal app, and it's just as simple as that. It is 4 lines of code. One, I load MGT in my app. Here, I say, hey, I'm building a single page app, and I created an app in Azure AD, right? So that my app knows how to access Microsoft Graph. In there, I use MSAL2, meaning I build a single page app. Now, if I wanted to build SPFX web part or Teams tab, I would authenticate differently. But in a single page app, I use MSAL2. I use a login so that users will have IUI. And with that, I want to show agenda, right? I want to show the list of events. So with that, let's have a look how that will work in practice. So I will do npm start to run this single file app in browser, and it's all live, right? So here I am already authenticated as Megan, and I can see that I have access already to my events coming from my calendar. Again, going back, this is the whole app. Notice that there is no auth code, handling auth responses, caching tokens, issuing requests to Graph, none of that. Why? Because I use Microsoft Graph Toolkit, and that does all of these things for me. So that is a quick overview. Let me give you some additional resources that you can use to explore it more, right? So the next step, I'd recommend you to take the Learn Microsoft Graph Toolkit learning path. It gives you a structured way to learn about Microsoft Graph Toolkit, the way it works, prerequisites, even to the point that we say, you know what? The only prerequisite you have is to know HTML, JavaScript, CSS basics. Beyond that, we're going to explain everything you need to know about Azure AD, AAD apps, registration, providers, taking you step by step in a thorough, structured way to help you learn. Another thing that you have seen is MGT Dev, which is the web experience that you can use to really easily try out what is in MGT, different options, providers, and so forth and so on, right? So there's a great way to try MGT in browser for yourself. And then the last step is check out the MGT docs, because they explain what is available in MGT, how you can use it. They show samples of code too, right? So it's a great place for you to go to when you use MGT in practice and you want to know more about different options. So with that, I'll give it back to Vesa.
Excellent. Thank you, Waldek. It's awesome to see how far we've gone and to simplify things. And the Graph Toolkit is just absolutely spot on. And now, thank you, Waldek, on that one. I will throw this one in here. So Maisa, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So hi, everyone. My name is Maisa Hissi, and I am PM on Microsoft Graph Developer Experience team focused on Graph SDKs. I'm going to talk about the Microsoft Graph .NET SDK, highlighting some of the new features and improvements in the V4. And Andrew is going to be doing a demo for us to show how you can take advantage of these new features. So we recently announced the general availability of V4, but to keep the speed short, since we don't have an endless time here, we had select some major updates to highlight in this call, but we'll soon share the link to the blog post that contains all the information you might need. So this new version of the SDK now takes advantage of the Azure identity to improve the authentication experience, providing support for interactive browser credential, which Andrew is going to show in the demo in a few minutes, and also client certificate credential, device code credential, and many others that you can find examples on how to quickly set up through the upgrade guide. We also moved from newtonsoft.json to the system.text.json, since the last one is faster in serialization and deserialization. This new library focuses primarily on performance, security, and standards compliance. So the SDK exposed the inbuilt serializer with the appropriate configuration. So you can use the serialize object and deserialize object methods for serialization to and deserialization from JSON. Microsoft Graph allows apps to subscribe to change notifications for resources, saving the subscriber from having to call back to fetch the changed resource. So to provide a better experience, the SDK now includes native support for to decrypt the resource data in read notifications payload. So you can count on functions such as air tokens valid or decrypt async to validate the token and decrypt content in the notification payload. We also did a bunch of cleaning. So for example, the SDK now also produces the graph response object, giving easier access to response information like headers and status codes, removing this information from the additional data property, allowing users to have a better experience and better performance during the deserialization of the response payload. The data type is no longer specified by default, so preventing users from having to performance workarounds for some scenarios where the API is not expecting this information. So now the property is only set in cases where type disambiguation is required. Still on the cleanup subject, the iGraph Service Client interface has been removed. We know it has been used to build application tests that depend on Graph Service Client class by users. However, this would cause code breaks whenever the Microsoft Graph metadata changes, making it less than ideal for mocking and inheriting. Thinking on it, properties and methods of Graph Service Client class have been made virtual, allowing mocking frameworks to override them. And last but not least, here are some of the major fixes included in this version. So beta and V1 libraries can now be used side by side in application. The page iterator has been moved to the core library, making it accessible through both libraries. And we added support to read stream responses in batch requests. To support all these new features and improve the development experience provided by the SDK, the minimum version of the .NET standard is now 2.0, and the .NET framework bumped to 4.6.2. As I mentioned before, you can access the blog post through aka.ms/ga-.NET v4 to have access to detailed information about the .NET SDK v4 and find important links such as the upgrade guide, where you can see all the updates for this new version, include those mentioned here and others, and which improvements are considered as a break change and which are not. So let's get straight over to a demo. Now I hand to Andrew, and he's going to show you some of these new features. Take it away, Andrew.
Hey everyone. Yeah, my name is Andrew, and I'm a developer from the Graph DevX team. So I'm just going to spend some time to demo some of the stuff that we've been trying to add and release in the new version of the SDK. The first thing I'm going to start talking about is really the authentication. So we've added support with with regards to using token credentials from the Azure.identity packages. So typically someone who is working from the Azure SDKs world can typically use the token credentials and just plug them into the SDK. And that also makes the setup of everything way easier since you don't really have to worry about the MSAL configurations. Like in this scenario, we want to do an interactive browser token acquisition, and you would just pass in the client ID into the options, create an interactive browser credential, and then pass it over directly to the Graph service client. And this would now help you be able to authenticate and be able to acquire tokens. So like for us to quickly run this, it would just like pop up the whole browser login window, and then I would be able to get back a Graph service client that has the tokens, a valid token for this. Yeah, and now the next thing maybe I would probably move on to is to talk about the serialization and the serialization work that we've done with regards to moving from Newtonsoft to system.txt.json. And a lot of that work is happening internally. And we've noticed that a number of SDK users did also have like a Newtonsoft specific code to serialize and deserialize payloads. And with regards to that, we encourage guys to sort of like use the wrapper methods and that we have exposed with regards to the serialize object and the deserialize object. So using them directly will create a serializer that is pre-configured to enable everyone to be able to do the work in the correct way without having to worry about whether you've made the appropriate configurations with regards to sending data to the graph and back from the graph. So the other thing is really that the properties in the additional data right now, you will notice that they are now of the type JSON element. So I remember with Newtonsoft, you would do like automatic casting and you would just cast the object to a string and whatnot. But since the JSON element from system.txt is really abstract and the whole boxing and unboxing business gets a bit tricky, you would find yourself having to write a statement like this to like sort of get the string out of the object in the additional data bug. The other thing is the other thing is now you won't find the headers and status information, just as Mesa had mentioned before. So that really is covered by the next feature that I was going to talk about, and this is with regards to the graph response. So the graph response really is a way to help users have more power and more control over how they want to handle their responses and data from the graph. So traditionally, you would find users like making a call to the graph with a statement that looks like this, where you would call the getAsync method. So with the graph response object, what we've done is for every getAsync method or postAsync method or updateAsync method, we now have another parallel method called like a getResponseAsync method. And what this does, it returns like a wrapper object, and the wrapper object is what we call the graph response object. And the graph response object will expose the headers, the content, and also the status code. And since this is now exposed, when you deserialize, when you make the native call before with the getter sync, you won't necessarily find the header and the status info in the payload. So and once you get the graph response object, you can now get the native object that you want. Like in this scenario, you want the user from the user response object. You can call the get response object async, and then it'll now call the serializer and give you back the user object. And with all this now, this enables you to make checks and write your code in the way you want it, because now you can validate whether the status code is as you expected or not. And then the other advantage is that you would find that since you had like the status info, the status code info, and the header info in the additional data object, if you try to modify a property and try to post the same object back to the graph, that would throw errors, and that would force users every time they want to update something, have to create a new object and post that. But now since there's no headers and status code info in the object coming back, you can actually modify the same object and send it back to the API. So other than that, there are other things, as Mesa has mentioned, where you can use the page iterator both in core, both in V1 and both in beta. And also we have sorted a lot of issues with regards to using V1 and beta in the same project. I think that's it from me.
Excellent. Right on time as well. Really cool to see the great improvements to make it easier. And that's a really good point as well, that you can use the same data object for updating information. So that's going to help a lot on making the code much cleaner. And again, just a reminder, HTTPS akmsga.net v4 is the AKMS address for that one. So to get more details on it. And then we'll move into the final show of the day. I think it's showtime, right, Will?
Yes. Well, I'll try to put on a show. Let's see here. Let me just share my screen. So some of y'all might be familiar with the Microsoft Teams UI kit. This is a Figma community file that folks are more than welcome to duplicate. Your firm might have already done this, and it contains a set of designs that we encourage folks to use as part of their app because it helps create consistent experiences that look and feel like Teams experiences. And they're ones we hope the community will share and build more experiences that look and feel native to Teams and are familiar to users and consistent. And as part of that effort, we built out a set of React components that are also open source and ready to use. So Fluent UI React Teams, it's part of the Fluent UI family, is a set of open source React components that implement the Teams UI kit. So anything that you see in Figma under UI templates, such as the wizard, are available in this library. And all you have to do is basically add it to your project and pull it in. I'll start getting into the details for a moment. Basically, it guarantees that it will match with the design system, that it will be accessible. It works in all of the different themes in Teams. So if users have high contrast, dark or light set, the components will work out of the box with that. And it's going to continue to grow and become more useful with basically your input. And I'll describe how you can offer that in a moment. What's included are basically, like I said, all of the UI templates from the Teams UI kit. So that includes the wizard, task boards, forms, lists, and they can be lists that are managed by the kit itself, or you can use individual tables. and then also dashboards, which include data visualizations. And these visualizations, again, work in all themes, including high contrast for users with different visibility. That's what's included. So basically, part of what's included is described in Getting Started. This also includes a provider, which will also give you the color palette for teams in Fluent UI. And so if your app is already using Fluent UI, the provider from React Teams will also give you access to all the correct colors, the correct and most up-to-date colors for the team's light theme, dark theme, and high contrast themes, and keep that up to date. Basically, to get started, all you have to do is pull in the provider and the component that you want. And when you render it, basically put the component you want in the provider and go from there. The idea is each component is basically all you have to do is give it a big JSON object. So if you're unfamiliar with React, this library could be really good for your case because you don't end up having to interact with React so much. You basically build out all of the props here. It can look a bit complicated, but for some of these, it's quite readable. For instance, for the form, you can specify different languages for the OK and cancel buttons. You fill out each of the input blocks and which type of input they are. And whenever the user interacts with one of these components, you'll get an interaction payload, which is also just JSON. And so in this way, you can basically interact with these interactive and usable React components without having to deal with React so much. Just want to point out, folks should be careful to use the correct types. This comes with also all of the documentation on each of the types. And so if there's ever a moment where you're not so sure what's going on, all of the types are documented here. Definitely recommend using TypeScript if you choose to dig in. Let's see. Yeah, and it also includes the storybook, so you can always access and play around with the storybook here. The knobs contain the way that this is configured and will stay up to date as you play with it. So you can play with the payload here and then copy it over if you choose. And then, yeah, right. So this project is supported mainly through GitHub. You can find the GitHub link from its NPM page, like I did just now in the repository section here. It's going to be released in semantic versioning. So any major versions are going to have a difference in API. And so if you're already using this, it's always safe to do minor and patch upgrades. But any major upgrades will involve an API change. We're going to start documenting migrations from one major API change to another. Usually they're not super significant, but we always lean on the, if any API is broken, we make a major release. And if there's any questions or feature requests, you're always welcome to file an issue. We do accept pull requests. So if there's anything about the components that you think could be better, by all means, submit an issue and maybe even create a fork of this project and make a pull request when it meets your criteria. We'd love to hear your feedback. And I think that's actually it for me.
Excellent. Thanks. Well, really, really cool stuff. And it's great to see that we have those controls available. And like I said, we will keep on evolving them. We will keep on supporting them. So there will be new controls available. The key objective here is to make it super easy also to create Microsoft Teams look and feel which is aligned to Microsoft Teams design guidance. So that's what we want to do. And more in the future, you will see the design guidance is getting more and more merged across the different products as well. So first of all, in the Fluent, and then more and more from a control perspective as well. But thanks, Will, on that one. So that sums up the show of today. Thank you, Waldek. Thank you, Maisa. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Will. We'll have another similar kind of setup from Microsoft presenters next week, where we're going to talk about, we had graph topics, then we had SharePoint list template topics, and then we have some other topics as well. I can't remember the agenda, but they're pretty much already booked. The recording and all of that will be available in 24 hours. Typically in 24 hours, we do apologize if it's slightly delayed every now and then, in the Microsoft 365 community YouTube channel. And then a week or two after the call, and the individual demos will be published as an individual videos as well. You should be following us on Twitter. It's the Microsoft 365 developer. That's the official developer tag. And then the Microsoft M365 BMP is our community tag in Twitter, in social media. The next Microsoft 365 platform community call is on September 7th, 8 a.m. Pacific time. But thank you everybody for joining. I'm going to close up in here just to call out still, we are merging these calls. Like I said, when we started, actually, Office add-ins call will have its own September, the final call on September, and then it's going to get merged on the Microsoft 365 platform call as well. So you'll see also Office extensibility topics as an individual demos and some of the calls. We always release the call agendas a few days before the actual live session. So you will know that is it an interesting one for you to join or not. And then the recordings will be typically out in 24 hours after the call. So recording completely is a valid option as well to stay up to date. All of the calls and assets from an AKMS M365 BMP, but that sums this one. This one's actually pretty okay. So for a first call of the series, so that's really cool, and we're not over time, which is great as well. But let's actually close up for the day. So thank you one more time for the presenters. Thank you for the lovely discussion also in chat. It's good to see active discussion in the chat channel as well. And as there's any feedback, ideas, suggestions, please keep on feedback coming. It's super important for us to understand what do you need to be successful in the Microsoft 365 platform. But that's it for now. Thank you. Bye-bye.